The galaxy burned under the shadow of extinction. For centuries, humanity had clawed its way across the stars, carving out colonies and forging alliances among distant worlds. But those days were gone. Now only ashes remained. The Zalthari, an ancient race awakened from eons of slumber, had swept through like a plague, consuming civilizations whole. Their ships moved silently through the void, blackened behemoths that devoured light itself. No one knew why they attacked or where they came from. All anyone could do was run, or fight until there was nothing left. Captain Elena Voss stared at the tactical display aboard the flagship, Erebus Dash, her jaw clenched tight. The remnants of Earth's once great fleet hovered before her, a pitiful collection of battered cruisers and frigates, barely holding together after years of retreat. Yet these broken vessels carried the hopes of billions. If they fell tonight, so too would humanity. Behind her, Commander Rourke approached, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. He didn't need to say anything. The tension in the air spoke volumes. Together, they watched as blips representing enemy forces closed in on the edge of sensor range. It wouldn't be long now. We've got maybe 3 hours before they're within firing distance, Rourke said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was steady but carried an undertone of weariness. They'd been running for too long, always one step ahead of annihilation. Tonight, however, there would be no escape. This was it, the endgame. Elena nodded, her mind racing. Every decision she made here could mean life or death for everyone aboard. She took a deep breath and turned toward the bridge crew. "Signal all squadrons," she ordered. "It's time to show them we're not done yet." As orders crackled across comms channels, the fleet sprang into motion. Pilots scrambled to their fighters, strapping themselves into cockpits that smelled of sweat and fear. Among them was Lieutenant Marcus Kane, a veteran whose scars ran deeper than just the ones visible on his skin. Once a reckless hotshot, Marcus had learned humility the hard way when he lost half his squadron during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Now he flew with precision, every move calculated to keep himself and his wingmen alive just a little longer. As he powered up his interceptor, the hum of engines filled the hangar bay, drowning out the doubts whispering in his mind. Could they really win this? Or were they simply delaying the inevitable? Elsewhere, engineer Tessa Morales worked feverishly in the belly of the Erebus Dash, patching damaged systems and rerouting power to critical defenses. Her hands moved deftly over panels of wires and circuits, sparks occasionally biting at her gloves. Tessa wasn't supposed to be here. She joined the military straight out of tech school, hoping for a quiet post fixing communication arrays. Instead, she found herself knee-deep in the wreckage of humanity's last stand. Still, she refused to give up. Each weld, each connection she repaired, was another small act of defiance against the darkness looming outside. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ship's command center, Intelligence Officer Priya Patel sifted through fragmented data feeds, searching for any weakness in the Zalthari armada. The enemy's tactics were brutal, efficient, almost machine-like. But something about their movements felt off. Patterns emerged if you looked closely enough, subtle repetitions that hinted at predictability. Priya leaned closer to her console, her brow furrowed. If she could crack this code, even partially, it might give the fleet a fighting chance. Time was running out, though. Outside, the first wave of Zalthari drones began probing the fleet's perimeter, testing defenses like predators circling wounded prey. The initial skirmish erupted without warning. Enemy fighters swarmed forward, sleek and silent, their weapons cutting through shields with terrifying ease. On the bridge of the Erebus Dash, alarms screamed as red lights flashed across consoles. Captain Voss barked commands, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. All units, fall back to defensive positions. Maintain formation. Around her, officers worked frantically to coordinate responses, relaying updates to squadrons scattered across the battlefield. Marcus dove his interceptor into the fray, weaving between bursts of plasma fire. His HUD lit up with targets, green reticles locking onto hostile craft. Pulling the trigger, he unleashed a barrage of missiles, watching as 2 enemy fighters disintegrated in fiery explosions. Beside him, his wingmen, Ensign Carter shouted triumphantly over the calm, "Gum, boss!" But the celebration was short-lived. From the corner of his eye, Marcus saw a third drone streaking toward Carter's position. "Break left!" he yelled, but it was too late. The young ensign's ship exploded in a brilliant flash, debris spinning wildly into the void. Gritting his teeth, Marcus vowed silently to make them pay. Back aboard the Erebus Dash, Tessa cursed under her breath as another section of the hull breached. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off corridors flooded with freezing vacuum. Grabbing her toolkit, she sprinted toward the damage site, dodging panicked crew members along the way. Reaching the breach, she activated her mag boots and stepped onto the exposed hull. Plasma bolts zipped past her head as she worked, welding plates into place while enemy fire rained down around her. For a moment, she paused, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. Somewhere out there, Earth still existed, a fragile blue marble clinging to life, and she'd be damned if she let it die on her watch. Deep within the Erebus Dash, Priya's fingers flew across her keyboard, piecing together fragments of intercepted signals. Something about the Zalthari's behavior nagged at her subconscious, like a puzzle missing its final piece. Then it hit her, a pattern hidden within their attack vectors. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, almost ceremonial. They weren't just destroying, they were harvesting. Harvesting energy, resources, perhaps even life itself. Whatever their goal, it meant they couldn't afford indiscriminate destruction. Therein lay their vulnerability. She rushed to the bridge, bursting through the doors just as another wave of enemy fighters broke through the fleet's outer defenses. Ignoring the chaos around her, she grabbed Elena's arm. "Captain, I think I've found something," she gasped. Quickly, she explained her theory, pointing out key moments in the battle where the Zalthari had hesitated, altering course to preserve specific structures or energy sources. Elena listened intently, her expression shifting from skepticism to determination. "If you're right," she said, "then we can use that against them. Spread the word, every ship needs to focus on protecting those targets. Force them to overextend." Word spread quickly, and the fleet adjusted its strategy accordingly. Fighters formed tighter formations around designated areas, luring Zalthari forces into traps. Explosions rocked the battlefield as humans struck back with renewed ferocity. For the first time in months, hope flickered amidst the carnage. But the cost was high. Ships crumbled under relentless assault, their crews vanishing into the cold embrace of space. Victory seemed impossibly distant, but surrender was unthinkable. The tide of battle shifted, but not decisively. The fleet's newfound strategy bought them time, precious minutes that felt like hours in the heat of combat. Enemy fighters swarmed like insects, relentless and unyielding. Yet, as Priya had predicted, there were moments when their movements faltered, hesitations born of a deeper purpose. The Zalthari weren't merely destroying. They were scavenging, harvesting energy signatures from obliterated ships and structures. It was a chilling revelation. They weren't just conquerors. They were parasites, feeding off the remnants of civilizations they annihilated. Captain Voss seized on this weakness with cold precision. "All units, prioritize disabling their harvesters," she commanded over the comms. Her voice carried an edge of desperation laced with resolve. If the humans could disrupt the Zalthari's ability to collect resources mid-battle, it might force them to retreat, or at least weaken their momentum. Across the fleet, pilots adjusted their tactics accordingly. Marcus Kane led his squadron into a daring strike against one of the larger harvester drones hovering near the wreckage of a destroyed cruiser. "Stay tight, team," Marcus growled into his mic. "We hit hard and fast, then we're out before they can counter." With practiced skill, he guided his interceptor through a gauntlet of enemy fire, weaving between plasma bolts and debris fields. Behind him, his remaining wingmen followed suit, their movements synchronized after months of fighting together. As they closed in on the harvester, Marcus activated his ship's EMP burst, a risky maneuver that would leave them vulnerable if it failed. The pulse erupted outward, bathing the drone in a shimmering field of electromagnetic energy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crackle, the harvester's systems overloaded, sending it spiraling into a nearby asteroid. Cheers erupted over the comm channel, but Marcus cut them short. "Don't get cocky. We've got more where that came from." While the fleet focused on crippling the harvesters, Tessa Morales faced her own battle aboard the Erebus Dash. The ship groaned under the strain of constant attacks, its systems pushed far beyond their limits. In the engineering bay, sparks flew as overloaded conduits exploded, forcing Tessa and her team to scramble from one crisis to the next. Sweat dripped down her face as she shouted orders, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Divert auxiliary power to the main reactor. If we lose containment, we're dead." Her assistant, a young mechanic named Jax, hesitated. "But what about life support? The lower decks are already—" "I know," Tessa snapped, cutting him off. She softened slightly, seeing the fear in his eyes. "We do this step by step. First, we keep the ship alive. Then we worry about everything else." Together, they worked feverishly, rerouting power grids and patching ruptured coolant lines. Each fix was temporary at best, but it kept the Erebus operational for now. Above them, the bridge crew monitored the situation with mounting anxiety. Commander Rourke leaned over Elena's shoulder, his expression grim. "Captain, structural integrity is down to 40%. Another direct hit, and we'll lose sections of the hull." Elena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at the tactical display, her mind racing. Sacrifices would have to be made. Lives would be lost. But surrender wasn't an option. Not here. Not today. "Tell all non-essential personnel to evacuate to the inner compartments," she ordered finally. "And prepare the emergency pods, just in case." Rourke nodded, though his jaw tightened. He knew as well as she did that just in case meant preparing for the worst. As the battle raged on, a new threat emerged, one that no one had anticipated. From the depths of space, a massive Zalthari dreadnought appeared, dwarfing even the largest human vessels. Its surface bristled with weaponry, glowing veins of energy pulsing beneath its obsidian shell. This was no ordinary warship. It was a juggernaut, a weapon of mass destruction designed to crush resistance in a single blow. Panic rippled through the fleet as the dreadnought locked onto the Erebus Dash, its targeting systems humming ominously. Priya Patel barely had time to process the data flooding her console. "Captain, it's emitting some kind of resonant frequency. It's destabilizing our shields," she warned, her voice trembling. Elena's heart sank. Without shields, the Erebus wouldn't last more than a few seconds under sustained fire. Desperation clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "All available fighters, converge on the dreadnought. Draw its attention away from us," she barked. Marcus and his squadron responded instantly, diving toward the behemoth with reckless abandon. Their tiny interceptors looked like gnats compared to the monstrosity looming ahead. Plasma cannons roared to life, spewing torrents of energy that vaporized several fighters in an instant. Marcus gritted his teeth, dodging blasts while coordinating strikes with his team. "Aim for the emitter nodes," he shouted. "If we can disable those frequencies, we might buy ourselves some breathing room." One by one, the pilots launched salvos of missiles, targeting weak points along the dreadnought's hull. Explosions blossomed across its surface, but the damage seemed superficial at best. The Zalthari vessel shrugged off the attacks as if swatting away flies. Back aboard the Erebus Dash, Tessa fought to stabilize the ship's failing systems. The resonant frequency emitted by the dreadnought was wreaking havoc on every piece of equipment, causing cascading failures throughout the vessel. Sparks showered from overhead panels as circuits overloaded, plunging sections of the ship into darkness. Tessa cursed under her breath, her hands moving frantically over her tools. "Jax, grab the dampening coils. We need to rig something to counteract that frequency," she ordered. Jax hesitated, panic evident in his wide eyes. "Are you sure that'll work? What if?" "Just do it," Tessa snapped, cutting him off. There was no time for second-guessing. Grabbing a welding torch, She began assembling a makeshift device using spare parts scavenged from storage crates. It was crude, but it might buy them enough time to weather the storm. Moments later, Jax returned with the coils, his hands shaking as he handed them over. Together, they installed the improvised gadget deep within the ship's core, praying it would hold. On the bridge, Elena watched as the dreadnought unleashed another devastating salvo. Shields flickered dangerously low, and alarms blared incessantly. "Engineering status report," she demanded. Tessa's voice crackled over the calm, strained but determined. "We've rigged a dampener. It should buffer the resonance for now. But it won't last long under sustained fire." Elena clenched her fists tightly around the armrests of her chair. Time was running out. Either they found a way to neutralize the dreadnought, or they'd be torn apart piece by piece. In the chaos of battle, Priya made a startling discovery. Hidden within the intercepted signals from the dreadnought was a repeating sequence, a code unlike anything she'd seen before. At first glance, it appeared random, but upon closer inspection, patterns began to emerge. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, cross-referencing the data with archived intel from previous encounters with the Zalthari. Slowly, a theory formed in her mind. The code wasn't just communication, it was control. A failsafe embedded within the dreadnought systems, possibly intended to override its functions remotely. Heart-pounding, Priya brought her findings to Captain Voss. "Ma'am, I think I found a way to disable the dreadnought," she said breathlessly. "If we can transmit this sequence back to it, it might trigger a shutdown." Elena frowned, skepticism warring with hope. "How reliable is this?" "It's not perfect," Priya admitted, "but given our current situation, it's worth a shot."
Elena nodded sharply.
"Do it, and make sure everyone knows what's at stake." With renewed urgency, Priya transmitted the sequence to the fleet's command network, instructing each ship to broadcast it simultaneously. The plan was risky. The signal needed to penetrate the dreadnought's defenses without being detected or countered, but it was their only chance. As the countdown began, tension gripped every corner of the fleet. Pilots held their breath, engineers prayed for stability, and commanders braced for whatever came next. The countdown reached its final seconds, and the fleet unleashed the signal. Every ship broadcast the sequence simultaneously, a cacophony of data flooding the void between them and the dreadnought. For a moment, nothing happened. The Zalthari war machine continued its relentless assault, plasma bolts raining down on the beleaguered human fleet. Then, with an almost imperceptible flicker, the dreadnought's glowing veins dimmed. Its weapons paused mid-fire, leaving eerie silence in their wake. On the bridge of the Erebus Dash, Captain Voss held her breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests of her command chair. "Report!" she barked, her voice cutting through the stunned quiet. Priya's fingers danced across her console, analyzing the feedback. It worked. The sequence disrupted their core systems. "They're rebooting?" She hesitated, unsure whether to celebrate or brace for retaliation. Marcus Kane, still leading his squadron near the dreadnought, watched in awe as the massive vessel went dark. "What the hell just happened?" he muttered into his calm before anyone could answer. The Zalthari fighter drones began retreating, pulling back toward the dormant behemoth like moths drawn to a dying flame. It was as if the entire enemy force had lost its will to fight, or perhaps its ability. But Elena wasn't ready to lower her guard. "Don't let your guard down," she warned the fleet. "This could be a trap." Her instinct screamed that it wasn't over yet. Somewhere deep within the dreadnought, something stirred. Energy readings spiked erratically, and faint vibrations rippled through space. Whatever they'd done, it hadn't fully neutralized the threat. It had merely awakened something else. Deep inside the dreadnought, ancient mechanisms groaned to life. Hidden chambers unlocked, releasing torrents of energy that surged through conduits long dormant. The Zalthari weren't simply machines. They were symbiotic organisms fused with technology. Their consciousness spread across vast networks of neural circuitry. And now, something far older and far more dangerous was awakening. Back aboard the Erebus Dash, Tessa Morales felt the ship shudder violently as residual waves of energy washed over it. "Captain, we're picking up massive power fluctuations from the dreadnought," she reported, her voice tinged with alarm. "Whatever we did, it didn't shut them down. It pissed them off." Elena clenched her jaw, her mind racing. If the dreadnought was regenerating, they needed a new plan, and fast. "Rourke, get me options," she ordered. Commander Rourke nodded grimly, already consulting with tactical officers. "We could try targeting the central node directly," he suggested. "But it'll require getting close enough to plant explosives manually." Elena turned to him sharply. "Volunteers." Before Rourke could respond, Marcus Kane's voice crackled over the comm. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. There was no bravado in his tone, only quiet resolve. He'd seen too many comrades fall to stand idly by while the enemy regrouped. Elena hesitated, weighing the risks. Sending someone into the heart of the dreadnought was tantamount to suicide, but she couldn't deny the necessity. "Permission granted," she said finally. "Assemble a strike team. Make it quick." Marcus gathered his strike team in record time. 3 other pilots willing to risk everything for a slim chance at victory. Among them was Ensign Lyra Chun, a rookie whose unshakable optimism masked a fierce determination. Also joining were veterans Sergeant Arlen Kovac and Lieutenant Cala Reyes, both seasoned warriors who knew the odds but refused to bow to them. Together, they boarded a stealth shuttle modified for infiltration, slipping past the remaining Zalthari defenses under the cover of jamming signals. Inside the dreadnought, the environment was alien and oppressive. Bioluminescent tendrils pulsed along the walls, casting eerie shadows that shifted unnaturally. The air hummed with latent energy, making every step feel heavier than the last. Marcus led the way, his weapon drawn and senses on high alert. Behind him, Lyra scanned the surroundings with a handheld scanner, searching for the central node. "Got it," she whispered after several tense minutes. "About 50 meters ahead, through that corridor." Marcus nodded, motioning for the others to follow. They moved cautiously, aware that one wrong move could trigger an ambush. As they approached the designated location, the corridor widened into a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsating orb suspended in midair. Rivers of energy coursed around it, feeding into the dreadnought systems. This was it, the heart of the beast. "Plant the charges," Marcus ordered. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before this place realizes we're here." As the team worked to set the explosives, alarms blared throughout the dreadnought. The Zalthari had detected their presence. Within moments, hordes of biomechanical drones swarmed into the chamber, their jagged limbs glinting menacingly in the dim light. Marcus raised his rifle, firing bursts of plasma to hold them at bay while his teammates finished their task. "Hurry up!" he shouted, ducking behind a console as enemy fire ricocheted off nearby surfaces. "Just 30 seconds," Cala replied, her hands trembling as she secured the final charge. Lyra, meanwhile, hacked into the node's interface, attempting to delay the activation of additional defenses. "I'm in," she announced triumphantly, routing power away from their security grid. But even as she spoke, the ground beneath them quaked violently. The orb flared brighter, its energy spiking dangerously. "We're out of time," Arlen yelled, tossing a grenade into the advancing swarm. The explosion bought them a few precious seconds, but reinforcements were closing in fast. "Charges are set," Cala shouted, backing away from the node. "Let's move." Marcus fired one last volley before turning to retreat, his heart pounding in his chest. They sprinted toward the exit, dodging blasts and leaping over debris as the chamber began collapsing around them. Behind them, the orb grew unstable, cracks forming along its surface as it prepared to detonate. The strike team barely made it back to the shuttle, diving aboard just as the first shockwave rippled through the dreadnought. Engines roared to life as the pilot, Lieutenant Samir Patel, punched the throttle, hurtling them clear of the impending explosion. Outside, the massive warship convulsed, its once impenetrable hull fracturing under the strain. Seconds later, the central node erupted in a blinding flash of light, consuming the dreadnought in a cataclysmic implosion. Shockwaves rippled outward, sending debris spiraling into the void. On board the Erebus Dash, the crew watched in stunned silence as the Zalthari flagship disintegrated, taking much of their fleet with it. Cheers erupted across the human fleet, tempered by the knowledge of how close they'd come to annihilation. Back aboard the shuttle, Marcus slumped against the bulkhead, exhaustion washing over him. His team sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They'd done the impossible. But at what cost? When they docked with the Erebus Dash, Captain Voss greeted them personally, her expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You saved us all," she said simply. "Thank you." But the victory was bittersweet. The Zalthari weren't defeated, they were merely delayed. Somewhere out there, more of their kind waited, watching. Humanity had bought itself time, but not peace. In the days that followed, the fleet limped towards safety, nursing its wounds and mourning its losses. Repairs were underway, stories shared, and plans made for the battles yet to come. Though battered and bruised, humanity endured, clinging to hope amidst the ashes of war. Captain Voss stood on the observation deck of the Erebus Dash, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before her, vast and unknowable. Yet within that expanse lay possibilities not just for survival but for renewal. Turning to Priya, who stood beside her, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever truly understand them?" Priya shook her head. "Maybe not, but understanding isn't always necessary. Sometimes, surviving is enough." As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, bound for a distant haven, one truth remained clear. The fight wasn't over. The galaxy still burned, but humanity's spark refused to be extinguished. The battle may have ended, but the war rages on. Will humanity rise from the ashes, or fade into the stars forever? Subscribe now to continue the journey and uncover the secrets of the cosmos.